Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Romeo and Juliet, and today we get to hear a monologue that I worked on when I was in college, which is as close as I ever have gotten or ever likely will get to actually playing Juliet. But I personally sort of love this monologue just because of where she starts the scene and then where she has to get in order to do this. So what has happened, she married Romeo in a secret ceremony like 3 hours ago, and she went home and she's waiting for nightfall, and she's really antsy for nightfall because she wants Romeo to show up so that they can consummate their marriage, because that's the fun part, right? And in the interim, Tybalt killed Mercutio, and then Romeo killed Tybalt, and Romeo has run away, and Romeo has been banished. And the nurse knows this because she was there, and she heard the prince make his proclamation that Romeo is now banished. And the nurse comes back to Juliet's place, and she has with her the rope ladder that she was sent to get so that Romeo would be able to actually get into Juliet's place. But she shares the news, and she's really bad about sharing the news, probably because she's in shock and grieving herself. But she doesn't at first come out and say that Tybalt is dead. She's just saying he's dead, so Juliet thinks that that's Romeo. And then the nurse is like, oh, Tybalt was the best friend I ever had. And Juliet's like, wait a second, both Romeo and Tybalt are dead? And the nurse is like, no, Tybalt is dead. Romeo killed him. Romeo is banished. And Juliet spent yesterday giving us a list of contracting statements or contradictory statements to try to sum up her feelings about Romeo. And by the end of her monologue yesterday, she was sort of the mindset that there's a lot more good to Romeo than bad. And the nurse is like, this is horrible. Like, there's nothing good left in men, and shame on Romeo for having done this. And Julia is like, shame is a shame to sit on Romeo's face, because Romeo is awesome and he's beautiful and I love him. And the nurse is like, will you speak well of him that killed your cousin? And Juliet says, shall I speak ill of him that is my husband? I, poor my lord, what tongue shall smooth thy name when I, thy 3 hours wife, have mangled it? But wherefore, villain, didst thou kill my cousin? That villain cousin would have killed my husband. Back, foolish tears, back to your native spring. Your tributary drops belong to woe, which you, mistaking, offer up to joy. My husband lives, that Tybalt would have slain, and Tybalt's dead that would have slain my husband. All this is comfort. Wherefore weep I then? Some words there were, worser than Tybalt's death, that murdered me. I would forget it fain, but oh, it presses to my memory like damned guilty deeds to sinners' minds. Tybalt is dead, and Romeo banished. That banished, that one word, banished, has slain 10,000 Tybalts. Tybalt's death was woe enough if it had ended there. Or if sour woe delights in fellowship, and needly will be ranked with other griefs, why followed not, when she said Tybalt's dead, thy father, or thy mother, nay, or both? Which modern lamentation might have moved, for which a rearward following Tybalt's death, Romeo is banished. To speak that word is father, mother, Tybalt, Romeo, Juliet, all slain, all dead. Romeo is banished. There is no end, no limit, measure, bound in that word's death. No words can that woe sound. Where is my father and my mother, nurse? So Juliet is understandably upset by this whole thing, and she starts out sticking up for Romeo, like, he's my husband. I have to say good things about my husband. I can't, rip on my husband. And then she laments the fact that it's because of their relationship and because of their names that Tybalt is now dead and Romeo is banished. Because, you know, if they hadn't been fighting and all that sort of thing, then, and or maybe Romeo would have jumped in from the beginning and Romeo and Tybalt would have fought and Mercutio wouldn't have died. Like, all of that stuff is going on. And then she tries to take comfort in the fact that her husband is still alive, even though her husband killed her cousin. She's reminding herself that her cousin would have killed her husband, and she's like, this is supposed to be a good thing and should be comforting. But then she latches onto that word banished, which, as you're doing your scansion of this particular piece, as you go through, banished appears like 5 or 6 times, and in different instances it should be banished versus banished, depending on your scansion, and also depending what you want to do with the scansion. Like, for example, Tybalt is dead and Romeo banished is a nice, happy, like even line. But if you want to show that she's distressed, you could do Tybalt is dead and Romeo banished, so that it ends on that one weird half of a foot that I know there's an actual name for, but I can never remember what it is. But it can help indicate that she's not necessarily in the best mindset right now. So some of it can be personal preference, but do your scansion and make your choices depending on how you feel as the character and feel about the character and the character's situation, that kind of thing. I know some people get really squidgy about it, but you can do what you want with that scansion. If you want to make it an odd line or if you want to make an even line, have fun with it, but have a reason for doing it. So anyway, she latches onto that word banished, and she's like, this, having Romeo banished, like, why couldn't it be my mom and dad are both dead? Why does it have to be Romeo is banished? Because having him banished is the equivalent of having all of us dead. There's nothing worse that could happen than having Romeo banished. And then she finishes off by asking where her mom and dad are, and the nurse says that they are out grieving and asks if Juliet is going to go and grieve with them for the loss of Tybalt, her cousin. And Juliet is like, maybe later, but hey, give me that rope ladder, because I'm not going to lose my virginity tonight. I'm going to lose my life. And the nurse is like, whoa, 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 no. I'm going to go get Romeo, and I'm going to bring him back, and he's going to comfort you. And Juliet's like, yeah, because that's going to be comforting. And that's the end of Act 3, Scene 2, as it exists. So I know that this particular monologue, when put with the gallop apace monologue, creates a huge emotional range that anybody playing Juliet needs to be able to tap into, and to tap into very quickly. And I personally know a lot of people who have had trouble with it when they get to this particular part of the play. And sometimes productions will cut part of this monologue or part of the other one to try to make that transition a little simpler. But it's precisely because it's so complex that I like Juliet a lot better than I would have if these two monologues did not exist together in the same scene. I think that it makes her a lot smarter and a lot more complex and very wise for her 13 years old. Yeah, and I empathize with her. And it also just makes her a lovely female character. When there aren't that many female characters in Shakespeare to begin with, it's nice to have one that is so rounded. Anyway, so that's the end of Act 3, Scene 2. We will be digging further into Act 3 starting tomorrow, because there's still a lot left of this play. We've got a couple weeks of this play left to go, and there's a lot of loose ends that need to be tied up. So I will see you tomorrow for more. Mwah.